Welcome to OAA Now, your home for Oakland Activities Association news and information. Here's your host, Sammy Taramina.
Welcome to OAA Now, Sammy Taramina, blog of the Dragon's Den, blog of Inside the OAA, and one of the hosts of Between Terminas on Orion Neighborhood Television. I'd like to welcome our friends watching on Oxford Community Television and also those watching on YouTube. It's a cold, blustery day here in the studio, so we've got a lot to talk about, especially in the basketball ranks. My biggest surprise is my biggest disappointments throughout the 2016-2017 school year. Also got some rumors to fill. Also got some rumblings. Of course, there have been a lot of rumblings going around Troy considering their football program, and also what is going on considering the Farmington football program. So a lot of rumblings going around the entire league. So let's go first with our main sport. It's going to be girls basketball, of course. When you look at how the week is settled for each team in the league, I've got my biggest surprise, my biggest disappointments. Teams I wouldn't press the panic button on. When I look at a team that's been a pleasant surprise, I would have to look at the teams down in the gold division. There's this one basketball team, of course, a lot of people said that was not going to be very good this year to start the year. And then this is a program that suffered a really bad loss to just an awful loss against Avondale. And then it's Hazel Park. And you look at Hazel Park, they got a new coach in there. And Chris Stroud, who took over the team this year. For Jessica Weisler. And his team right now sits at 3-1. And now when you look at the schedule, nobody expected Hazel Park to be a 3-1 basketball team. You know what I mean? A lot of hype was around the boys team. Now when you look at the schedule that Hazel Park's played, really not really impressive. But it's a basketball program that sits at 3-1. Got a lot of talent, of course, led by Elizabeth Sterner. Been playing very well as of late. Now, when they get in the league play, I think the schedule's going to be really difficult when they got to play teams like Berkeley and Groves. Of course, Groves this year has played a monstrous, difficult non-conference schedule. And then Berkeley, of course, they're one of those teams under Jordan DeGrippin to they're gonna make some noise this year. So when you look at Hazel Park, they're benefiting. A lot of people say they're gonna be benefiting from playing a SOP non-conference. And when I look at their schedule early on, I think it's not a good schedule to play. Whereas you're seeing like teams playing in these tournaments, sort of like what Southfield Arts and Tech is doing. Stony Creek's played a ridiculously brutal schedule. It's gonna get real tough this upcoming these next 2 weeks with the Michigan Holiday Classic tournament going on over at Detroit Edison. But Hazel Park is a team I think that they're one of my surprises right now, sitting at 3-1. But the schedule is very much very questionable when you look at the strength of that team there. So that's a team to look at is Hazel Park. But they had that early season loss to Avondale. That they were just humiliated by Avondale. On that one, but they're benefiting right now under first year coach Chris Stroud. They're benefiting right now, and right now his team sits at 3-1. So another team, who's got a new coach over there at Ferndale is over at Ferndale, of course. George Gleason resigned over there. In its place is a guy named Chris Felter. And Cody Flinter, that's my bad. Of course, he was an assistant at Ferndale last year under Gleason. He has brought in some good assistant coaches. I like that he brought in Melanie Lamorato into his staff. I really like that move because Lamorado brings some experience. She's been on she was on the 2009 state semifinal team at Lake Orion. So I think that was a great move for Ferndale to bring her in to the fold. And also, you look at I think a program wide for Ferndale. I really believe that they have to they've got to develop their sub varsity programs. You know what I mean? Because in this, I understand it's tough with girls, going out for sports, especially in basketball. Where you just have varsity teams only. You look at teams like Harrison and Ferndale; they have just varsity teams only, and I would encourage, those two programs to bring up sub varsity teams like a freshman or a JV team. Participation I know has been down, but especially those two teams like Harrison and Ferndale. I encourage those two teams to bring their sub varsity, bring some sub varsity. I think it could help. The more players, the better off the program is. So Ferndale, interesting. They look good against East Detroit. They still gonna have to play them again. But when you look at Ferndale, they got a lot of experience back from a team that went winless last year. I think Flenner's gonna bring some positive influences to Ferndale. I really think that when you look at that stretch of games, like I said, they're in the same boat as Hazel Park. Benefiting for playing a not a strong non-conference schedule. They're benefiting from playing against some, weaker competition. But when they get to league play and you're playing against teams like Groves and Berkeley, of course, we remember with Groves last year, with Ferndale, they got into a fight last year. That was sad. It was unfortunate. But when you look at Ferndale, they have to improve. You know what I mean? It wasn't that long ago that the Eagles were they were on the upward swing up. Then Antoinette Miller left, and she ended up being one of South Electric's top players. Since now she's at Cincinnati, and you look at Ferndale, they've really suffered since Miller left that program. When they had some great talent over there. So they've been downhill. I think Flenner's going to be the guy that gets Ferndale back on the right track. And they got that big win against East Detroit. I thought that was going to be a good win for them. This was a team that made district final last year. So, but as I said, the jury's still out. You know what I mean? You got to win games in your division. I would say if you're a contending team in your division, I think you'll be fine. I really believe you're going to be fine. Ferndale's a team that really has a lot of talent back. They did open up their own Twitter page. They ended up doing a lot of things. I like the direction where this program is going. But at the end of the day, you got to produce results. And, Ferndale's been on and off. So, like I said, it all depends with Ferndale, with them going forward. But it's an interesting team, the Eagles are. They're an interesting team to keep an eye on heading into the season. So, we shall see what happens there. On to my biggest disappointments. When you look at disappointments, there's one team I really got to think of. They had a lot of expectations. I thought that this team would play so much better than what the record indicated. And unfortunately, they have not lived up to expectation. And that is the Rochester Falcons. Hit the program since 0-4. Did not look good against Linden the other night. And Linden was just completely annihilated by Lake Orion. But Rochester playing Linden the other night in the girls. This is girls. This is not guys. We'll go over guys in the next segment. But Rochester lost 42-28 to Linden. You know, when you look at last year's team with all the injuries they had, when you lose girls like Paloma Barraza Duran and Jenna Norgrove to injuries, you know, and then of course coming into the year, I thought personally that with those two back healthy, and you have Tori Hawkins who had a really good year last year, and they really have not proven up to expectation. And here's a team that sits at 0-4. Now, is the pressure on Adam Sheldon? You know, I believe it is, because when you're a team that I thought personally would be a team that could win the Blue Division this year, especially in a league where Mackenzie Harbord's done for the season, and it's wide open. The Blue is wide open as the Grand Canyon. You know, I thought Rochester would be a team that could be a real sleeper. A real sleeper. Instead, now here's a team that's 0-4, got some issues in the interior, really have not had some issues with team chemistry. It's looking like that over there. You know, but when you're 0-4 to start the year, that's not good. I mean, and you still have to play Adams in your schedule in the Crosstown Showdown. Adams, of course, the team, they have a lot of experience on that team, you know what I mean? They have a lot of experience. There's no doubt about that. But back to Rochester, you know, I thought this would be a team that would make a move. I really thought that this would be a team that would seriously make a move, make that next step, and they really have not done that. And that's a problem that I have with them. They have a very promising sophomore class. There's no doubt about that. But if there was a team that I would be just completely nodding my head, disappointed, you know, it's Rochester. You know, because I thought personally, heck, I even ranked them one of the favorites to win the Blue Division. Now, can they still win the Blue Division? Sure they can. But the way they're playing, they don't look like, to me, they're going to beat a team like a Troy or a Seaholm or a Troy Athens. You know what I mean? So those are teams that I've been disappointed with Rochester, especially Rochester. So, you know, in all reality, you know, you can't always look at, I know you can understand looking at record and look at talent, but if there's a team that really needs to fix their team right now, it's Adam Sheldon's team. And it's an unfortunate situation over there, what's going on with them Rochester. And you know, but that's the team I'm most surprised with is Rochester. Really is. You know, another team that, you know, I thought could have made some noise early on. They've really started to gel a little bit despite the record. But I'm a little surprised is when you look at a team like Troy. I mean, you know, the Troy girls team. Of course, not about a heck of a coach, very good coach. You have a girl like Megan Lenhan on your team. You know, who's supposed to be but I really think that the injury to Danica Murray has really hurt the Colts. You know, when you look at that injury there, you know, Murray would have been the perfect complement to Lenahan. I think she's still out another week with that finger injury. with that ankle injury. So, when you look at that situation, I think that the Danica Murray injury has really hurt Troy. Do I consider Troy a disappointment? No. I was a little surprised they lost the other night to Chippewa Valley. I didn't expect them to lose 56-48 the way they did. However, there has been a good presence lately. Her name is Athena Sampson. She has really stepped her game up, especially the last 2 games. I know the other night she had 25 points against Chippewa Valley. Ever since the Lake Orion game, she really has improved as a player. Really has. So when you look at Troy, this is a team. I like Troy, but without Danica Murray on that team, without Danica Murray on the floor, they got some good players. They got Shannon Lynn's not a bad player, but I really think this team is much different when Murray's on the floor than Lynn. Now Lynn can definitely shoot. There's no doubt about that. But you have that post presence in Sampson. You have Lenahan, and then you have, of course, Murray when she comes back. You can even maybe go with the 3-guard set. You know what I mean? You could put Lenahan at the 3, Murray at the 2, Lynn at the 1. And everything takes care of itself for Troy, first-time battles team. So when you look at Troy, I really wouldn't consider them a disappointment as much as I would consider Rochester to be a major disappointment. I just think that Matt Murray injury is really hurting Troy right now. I really do. And you look, it's pretty much very similar to what's happening at Seaholm, with the Mackenzie Harbord injury. The Maples are a much different team without Harbord than they are with Harbord. If Harbord would have played this year, then Seaholm's a much different team than with her than without her. I thought it was a bold statement that January Halusky said, the coach over at Seaholm said about them. That they would win a lot of games. I don't know about that schedule though. Played Stony Creek, shortened game because of a emergency situation with one of the players there. They got to play Clarkson, which is going to be very difficult. And it's kind of funny with Seaholm and Clarkson because when you look at that matchup, it's kind of odd because Seaholm matches up Clarkson very well in the interior. When you look at Wendy Wilkerson, Dana Holman, up against Kayla Lukenbach, Molly Nicholson, Allie Butch, and Blyser. However, if you put Lukenbach at the 3-guard spot, they're going to have problems. There's no doubt about that. It's kind of odd because Seaholm just does not match up well with Clarkston based on the they wouldn't match them up because of the guards, because I think Maddie Beck would have a heck of a game. When you look at I think one of the biggest games around the league this upcoming week, I would say Clarkson Lake Orion's a big game. I really do. And it's because, last year was a very interesting game. Game was ended up won by the Wolves. Curious to see how Lake Orion will match up with Clarkson's size up front. But also I'm curious to see how Clarkson coach Christine Rogers matched up with Maddie Novak. I think Novak's got a lot more help than people think this year. It's just how they gel. That's going to be the key. And a lot of teams really against Lake Orion the last 2 weeks has really benefited, has really focused on shutting Novak down. And that's very interesting. Very, very interesting. So we'll see what happens there. I think that's a big one for the week, is Lake Orion Clarkson. As final thoughts, of course, my biggest surprise is Hazel Park. My biggest disappointment is Rochester. But we'll see what happens. There's still a lot of season to go, so we'll see what happens going forward. Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk about boys basketball, my surprises, my disappointments, my teams who you should press patience or panic here at OAA.
on a Habitat home?
I love working on my Habitat home.
Soy dueño de una casa de Habitat.
My neighbor is a Habitat homeowner.
Being a Habitat homeowner has changed our lives.
My mortgage payment for Habitat is less than what I paid for rent.
Habitat for Humanity of Oakland County currently has homes available with mortgage payments lower than most rent payments. If you or someone you know needs decent and affordable housing, call 248-338-1843 or visit our website at habitatoakland.org.
Welcome back to OAA Now. I'm Sammy Tamini here. Of course, we got a lot of boys basketball to go over with here. We look at some of the games here. We look at some of these teams. They're off to some great starts. Avondale had a nice win the other night against Lake Orion. Troy, they're off to a nice start. Clarkston, we know about them. Had a nice win against Orchard Lake. St. Mary's got a big one on Friday with River Rouge. And then, of course, we look at teams like Adams who kind of struggling a little bit, you know what I mean? But let's look at some surprises. My surprise team right now in the boys would have to be Avondale. Because when you look at the Yellow Jackets, everybody thought, okay, this is a team, Tim Horton's team. They were, last year they were just completely decimated. They were very young. I thought, when they had those 9 players back for them, I really think that this is a team that could make some noise this year in a very difficult white division. And you look at that white division, it's going to be very difficult. When you look at teams like, when you look at Hazel Park, Troy, you got Avondale in there. You got Pontiac, Oak Park. I mean, it's not an easy division. Hazel Park's a dangerous team. And you look at Troy, they're a very dangerous team. And then of course you have some very nice some good teams in that division. But Avondale is a team that I thought that they would be a middle of the pack team this year. It wouldn't surprise me at the end of the year that this Yellow Jacket team will be one of the top teams in the white this year. It really wouldn't. I've got depth concerns at Hazel Park. That's a huge major concern for them going forward. I personally think that Hazel Park, they're not, besides Carl Bowe, David Hearns, they're really not that. They're not that deep, and there's a lot of concerns there. But Avondale, to me, is my surprise team heading in the year. Another team that I'm surprised with is Farmington. Here's a basketball team, under Terrence Porter. They got some key players back. Jordan Graham is back. They got a couple other ones. But Farmington's a team that is expected to make some noise this year. They're one of the favorites in the gold division. They've played some. They didn't play good competition the other night against them. Played a Catholic. They played like a charter school the other night. Kind of very surprised that that they didn't play really well. That they played well in that one. So Farmington's a team to keep an eye on going forward. So that's another one I'm surprised with. I think the best game of the night, when I look at best games of the night, and to me this was crazy. And they sent it on YouTube. And it was a game between Birmingham C Home and Birmingham Brother Rice. I got to give a lot of credit to the Maple Forest for supporting their team, being in that game, and C Home's boys basketball team under Coach Mike DeJeter for winning that game against Birmingham Brother Rice. If you look at it, there is a YouTube video. If you're a C Home fan, I encourage you to follow Bill Watson on Twitter. Bill Watson, of course, his Twitter page is Billaboo. Sent a nice YouTube video about last night about the game between Birmingham Brother Ice and Seaholm. Of course, the final seconds where Seaholm ended up making the game-winning basket late. It was 49-49, and then they ended up getting a rebound and getting a nice putback in there for the win, and then which caused the Maple Force to storm the court. A lot of surrender Cobras were there the other night. A lot of surrender Cobras were there. I mean, especially from the Birmingham Brother Ice side of things. When you look at Seaholm, this is a team that's going to be in it. They're a very scrappy bunch. And they took their lumps. They built the program on basically mental toughness. And I got to give Seaholm a lot of credit, you know what I mean, for what they did. Besides those god-awful uniforms that they have, I wish they really would change them. But other than that, they got some great players on that team. They got some good players on that team. Really good, scrappy, hardworking players. So when you look at on that YouTube page, you know what I mean? When you look at that YouTube game, look how they rebound. Look how hard work that they do. And you tell me that's a team that wants it. You tell me that's a team that really wants this year. And Seaholm, I think, is going to be one of those teams this year that are going to be in a lot of ball games. I expect the Maples to be in a lot of ball games this year. I really do. I mean, that's how good they are. Rochester beat Linden the other night, 57-37. Hunter Schlachner at 34 points. Here's a guy last year against Lake Orion did not score a point. And yet he puts up 34 against Linden. Now, Linden this year in boys basketball is not necessarily the greatest team. They really aren't. But when you look at what Rochester has back 2 years after that disastrous winless season that they had, they've really managed to bounce back. They've really managed to play much better basketball. The boys basketball program and the girls basketball program at Rochester are in two different stratospheres right now. One's up, the other one's down. As mentioned earlier with Rochester, the girls team is on the way, is down right now, but their boys program is up right now. And I got to give a lot of credit to Coach John Plessant's team. They've got a lot of experience, there's no doubt. I think the influence of Jeff Haney in that program is there. I also think that they've got a lot of good players on that team. When you look at Ivan Barraza Duran, you look at of course we talked about Schlachner already. You look at LaMarco Gilridge, who I think is going to be who's been a very good player for this team. They've got depth, and that's something that Rochester has in the boys. They've got some depth. They've got a lot of depth, and I think that depth's going to help them going forward. And they could be a team to keep an eye on going forward with Rochester. Now, when you look at Groves, look at Rochester's other competition, which is going to be Groves most likely. Groves got size, there's no doubt. I mean, they just took down Holly the other night, 86-70. I mean, they got a lot of size, but they also got a lot of experience as well for Coach Mark West's team. Groves, I think, personally, on the way up. They had that shocking run in the district final last year where they came out of nowhere, won that district at Avondale. Now, when you look at Groves, this is a team that really they could make some noise this year. They really could. I mean, they've got a good enough team. I think they've got size. They match up very well with teams. I think when you look at Groves right now, I really think that this is a team that they're playing well on all cylinders right now. This could be a good basketball team this year, and Groves could have one this year. They could. They very well could. Let's look at teams that, off the sluggish starts. Not pressing the panic button on these teams yet. When you look at how these teams' seasons have been so far. Let's go with Adams first. Now, Adams kind of has... I'm going to defend Coach Brad Crichton's team here. I mean, they really have not fared very well this year. Took another bad loss the other night to Troy. Lost 63-43. Now, I understand they don't have 4 of their starters that are in there. Been having tough injuries. And, it's a very tough situation when you have 4 starters that are out with injuries. And you're playing a very difficult schedule to start the year. Considering what Adams has played, they've had to play Utica Eisenhower, and then they've had to play Troy the other night. So if I'm Brad Crichton's team, I'm right now pressing I'm not pressing the panic button at all, because I think there's a lot of patience with this team. I know how fiery Crichton is when he was at Stony Creek for girls. He had a lot of passion. And I know his successor over there, Kellen James, he's got a lot of passion too. You know what I mean? But when you look at Stony Creek's girls basketball team, that schedule they have, rest of the non-conference, is brutal. I mean, when you look at playing against Belleville, Waterford, Kettering, they would have had Birmingham Marion on the schedule. I don't know why Birmingham Marion dropped out. Would have been a heck of a game. But back to boys. When you look at Adams, I'm pressing the patience button on this team. Because I think they're going to get better with time. Now, they're in a very difficult division. There's no doubt about that. Considering you have Clarkson in there. Bloomfield Hills, that is often when I started to coach Mike Mariansky. West Bloomfield, it's been a very much a surprise to me. They played a brutal schedule. We'll go over them in a minute. But if I'm Adams, I'm pressing the patience button here. I really am. Next team is West Bloomfield. This is a team I really got concerns with them. West Bloomfield, the way they've lost 2 tough games, they're playing some good competition. I understand that, but this could be a team that could be in for a long season. I really believe this could be a team that could be in for a long season. And that's because you can't rely on Kevin McAdoo to carry your team. You can't. And that's I guess what he's doing right now. And you can't rely on that if you want to be successful. So that's a team I'm pressing the panic button on. It's West Bloomfield. North Farmington. Last year, this team went to state final a year ago. I think it's time to press the panic button on Tom Negocian's team. And here's why. You have a player in Amari Hardy. He's going to Georgia Tech. Do you let Amari Hardy get his points and shut everybody else down? That's basically what teams should do against North Farmington. Yes, they have that pressure defense, that pressure trap defense, but it didn't work. It didn't work well for them against a very good Southfield Christian team. It really did not do them any good. And it was an unfortunate situation for them, So when you look at the teams right now, when you look at North Farmington, I really would press the panic button on North Farmington. I really would. And it's because You know, if Hardy doesn't find a Robin, last year Hardy benefited. He got a lot of points because North Farmington had a lot of great players that played. When you look at a Jacob Jober, when you look at a couple years ago, it was Jerome Rogers. And, I think when you look at, and then of course, and you look at North Farmington now, this is a team that's really struggled. They've really, if Amari Hardy gets his points and you shut everybody else down, you're going to beat North Farmington. That's really the ins and outs of that. So if I'm North Farmington, panic button. That's seriousness, sir. Ferndale. Time to press the panic button on them. Here's why. When you look at Ferndale, this is a team that really has this is a basketball team that really has a lot of they're not deep at all. They're a young team. And this is one that I think that Coach Tom Stanton, you know what I mean? I know he preaches patience, but I would say right now, the way they've been playing, they haven't played great competition, but they just lost by 15 the other night. I believe it was Madison Heights Bishop Foley. Other end of the day, not a good loss for that team. Not a good loss. So if I'm pressing the panic button on Ferndale right now because I don't think anybody's touching Farmington. I really don't. In that division, Berkeley. If Berkeley, patience with Berkeley. You know what I mean? They've done very well under Joe Thurman. Done very well. I like that team a lot. I really do. Last but not least, before we head to break, is Lake Orion. Team that sits 0-3. Playing a murder's row of a schedule. Of course, when you're playing against teams like Clarkston, Troy, and Avondale, combined record of those teams are 4-0. Oh, actually, 5-0. That's brutal. And you look at this team that's really... They've been taking a lot of lumps. I read interesting the other night. Lake Orion coach Jim Mansell said that team was making progress. You're making progress. I think this team needs a lot more practice time, to be honest with you. Because, when you're looking at this team, it's a very young team. When you look at Lake Orion, they've only have like 2 true starters that played varsity basketball from a year ago. This is a completely different team. And, you're going up against teams that are senior heavy or junior heavy, having a ton of experience. You're going to take these lumps. And that's what's going on right now with Lake Orion. They're taking a lot of lumps. They're taking... this is a team that really... they look like right now, they're struggling. And they're young. There's times that you got to look at, your team and, first quarter's been tough for this team, trying to battle back, you know what I mean? They did make some progress the other night against Avondale because they fought with Avondale. They battled with them for 3 quarters, The only difficult quarter was that first quarter. And, so and you're going to have to take these lumps because, when you're a young basketball team, like Lake Orion is, now, I'm not questioning anything with this team, but they got a big one Tuesday. It's a must-win game against Romeo for this team. It is. And it's pretty much, when you look at the month of December for this team, you knew it was going to be very difficult. Of course, when you're playing against Clarkston, Troy, Avondale, and then you got to play Romeo, which is going to be very difficult. Nothing's easy, and it's not supposed to be. But there's a lot of people who are not going to feel sorry for him. I mean, Lake Orion's a big school. When you look at having a lot of kids, very similar to Clarkston, big school. So a lot of interesting dynamics why you see this team struggling right now. So, but if I'm Lake Orion, I'm saying patience. Because this team's going to get better. They're going to get better. And to see that this team is, they're making progress, it's a good thing, It's a good start. It's now you got to put that progress aside. You got to put that progress there and got to get some wins here, You got to get some wins. Wins will help with confidence. And, so we'll see what happens going forward. But if I'm Lake Orion, patience. Patience, patience, patience. Okay, now when we come back, we're going to talk more basketball here on OAA Now.
Prescription drug abuse is a national epidemic. The new in way to obtain drugs is through parents' or grandparents' medicine chests. Removing prescriptions from your cabinet is the best way to keep drugs out of the hands of our young people. We've got to work together to protect our teens, our seniors, and our environment. Clean out your medicine cabinet today. Please participate in Operation Medicine Cabinet and drop off your unwanted or expired prescriptions at one of our law enforcement drop-off sites in Oakland County. We can't ignore this situation anymore.
Welcome back to OAA Now. I'm Sammy Tamina here. Of course, been a lot of rumblings in the football field. Before we get to more basketball, been a lot of rumblings surrounding possible rumors going around with coaching changes. There could be two schools that are been rumored around the been a lot of rumblings going around surrounding these two programs. But when you look at a team like Farmington, of course, is a team that really got to make some changes. At the end of the day, when you look at top coaching candidates, who I think would make perfect sense heading into the off season, there's some assistants I think can make some noise, considering some big coaching jobs there. Of course, in football, there's always a lot of coaching changes. It's not like the NFL in which, in the NFL, there's always, surprised that Jeff Fisher got fired the other day from the Los Angeles Rams. But that's going to be for another topic on Between Terraminas about that one. Either way, when you look at coaching changes, sometimes they do well for a program, sometimes they don't do well for a program. And you look at if there are any seats that are considered hot seats right now, as I mentioned earlier, during football season, I would say the hot seat would be at Farmington. And they had a really rough year last year. They had a really rough year this season. They're going to be in the blue division this year for football. They got to get the right guy in place there. I think, I don't know if John Bechtel is going to be back there or not, but they've got to have the right. If he's gone, I would say the perfect fit would be one of Harrison's longtime assistants. Now, I don't know his name, but I think it would be an interesting fit for Farmington, considering that, I think Farmington's a good job, considering that it's got great facilities there. It's got good facilities there. You look at Farmington, you can bring kids in from Detroit. You can bring them in. It's very interesting, to say the least. It's very, very interesting. But I think that would be a very interesting job, if John Bechtel were to leave Farmington. And, so that's another job that could be another that's interesting. Now, Farmington had a really rough year this year. They had some games. They technically beat Walled Lake Western via forfeit. Kind of a little surprised that, that Walled Lake Western would use an ineligible player in that game. But either way, I just think that you got athletes who were at Farmington. And I think that team needs to make some changes. And that's one of those teams to keep an eye on going forward. Another team to keep an eye on going forward is going to be at Troy. And you look at possible rumors about surrounding Gary Griffith's career over there. And you look at Troy, this is a school where sometimes, academia over athletics is to me it's a concern a little bit because, a lot of people Troy's a big school. They have got a lot of kids in that school. I mean, there should be no reason why this program should not have a freshman football team. There's no reason. And for the amount of kids that they have over there, it's disappointing that Troy did not have a freshman program this year. It really is. Because, when you have kids in the program that's been there, that it brings more kids in the program. It's kind of very similar with girls basketball. When you look at with Harrison and Ferndale, with the fact that they're the only two teams in the OAA that do not have freshman or JV programs. Now, Troy did have a JV program this year. But I would say personally is the Troy school district's kind of like an open enrollment in their school district, and a lot of the athletes have tended to go to Troy Athens over the last couple seasons, and you see why Troy Athens had a lot of success this year, against Troy. Now they had a really rough year this year, but I think Troy's another place where they're gonna have to make some changes. Could it be letting Gary Griffith go, and could it be letting him go? And that's a question a lot of people have said. When we look at the program there, I think Troy is a mess. I really do. The way that they were this year, I thought they would make a lot of. They would have had a much stronger season being down in the blue. They had some really bad losses. The game against Royal Oak really described that one for me. Where they end up losing that game. And when you struggle against a team like Troy Athens, when you're losing games against them, I mean, that's going to take its toll. And so it wouldn't surprise me if those two jobs are open, but it also wouldn't surprise me if both of those two guys are back this year. It really wouldn't. Now, when you look at the status of football, I think at the end of the day, I think Bloomfield Hills needs to go up from the blue to the white because they had a really nice year last year, the undefeated season, before losing to West Bloomfield in the first round of the playoffs. So this is going to be very interesting. Now Bloomfield Hills, a lot of people said about this team is they're going to be okay this year. They're going to be all right. They got the quarterback back, John Paddock back. The question's going to be is, how is his team going to rely? Are they going to go back to the transfer department? We don't know. So that's another storyline there. There's a couple storylines there. Of course, the Farmington situation, the Troy situation, rumblings. And then, of course, we've got the Blue Bay Hill situation, how they're going to adjust next season. And then another one is the Southfield Arts and Tech quarterback situation. Is it settled? You look at South. Of course, Sam Johnson III was one of the most hyped up quarterbacks in the entire, not only in the league, but the entire state. And you look at rumblings that he could be on the way out. It wouldn't surprise me if he's on the way out, because here's why. Because you just found your quarterback over there. You just found a very good quarterback who can run, who brings the threat of a run threat than just an ordinary passing threat. Now, Sam Johnson III, not really much of a runner, as much as who Southfield Arts and Tech had their quarterback spot playing in the playoffs. So, is it time for Sam Johnson to possibly leave Southfield Arts and Tech? Is it time? Considering that the Warriors are starting to go more to that read option look now. But that's another question mark. That really is another question mark. So we'll see what happens there on that standpoint. That's another storyline. So a lot of football storylines heading into the 2017 season. And it's going to be very interesting to see. We'll keep an eye a lot on this, on everything here on OAA Now, especially on the blog at Inside the OAA at Sammy_Termina at blogspot.com. And also on the podcast as well. As mentioned before, back to basketball. Interesting games over the weekend. Could be a snowy and cold weekend. You know what I mean? Could be freezing rain in the forecast, possibly. But there's a couple interesting games this weekend that I'm keeping keeping an eye on. Of course, the big one in girls is going to be Lake Orion Clarkson on Friday night. I think it's going to be a heck of a game between those two teams in girls basketball. Others include, I know there's like a tournament this weekend. I know that. I think Southfield Arts and Tech's in that. Keep an eye on that. We'll see what happens there going forward, and we'll see what happens this upcoming year. Of course, cheerleading just started their competitions. They're well underway. I still think the three best teams in the best teams in the OA are still in the red division. When you look at Rochester, Stony Creek, Troy, Athens, and Lake Orion, all in that competitive cheerleading bounce there in that division. Wrestling's already underway. Of course, I think one of the top OA teams this year is going to be Oxford, because they've always had a wrestling powerhouse program there. Got to keep an eye on Clarkston. Got to keep an eye on Adams, Rochester, maybe Lake Orion. I mean, Southfield Arts and Tech as well. They're going to be solid as well. So we'll see what happens with them going forward this upcoming season in wrestling. And bowling, of course, we'll keep an eye on them as well. So we'll see what happens going forward with them. So a lot to talk about. You know what I mean? We'll see what happens going forward. Keep an eye on a lot of basketball going on throughout the week and the weekend. Of course, we had a lot of weather cancellations the other day. Hoping those games get made up. Of course, Oxford and Adams was one of them in girls basketball. Avondale and Cranbrook Kingswood, they They're playing on Wednesday, which should be very interesting. I really think Avondale will win that match for Cranbrook Kingswood. Really like where new coach Phil Dawson has taken that team. Even they had a really tough loss to Novi the other night. You know, West Bloomfield, same boat. They ended up losing a buzzer beater to Lakeland. Still had that video up. So we'll see what happens going forward in that process there. All right, now we're going to sign off here. Enjoy the snow. Enjoy the snow. Enjoy the snow. Yes. All right, signing off here. Good night. God bless all. See you next week.
OAA Now is produced at Orion Neighborhood Television, Lake Orion's community media outlet. To learn more about ONTV, visit our website at www.orionontv.org or call us at 248-393-1060.